This is my true story. I never cared about money or business. I only wanted respect from my own family. My son married a woman who smiled in front of me but laughed behind my back. She called me old-fashioned, slow, and out of touch. I ignored her for years, thinking she'd grow up, but at one dinner, she crossed the line. She mocked my age in front of everyone, even my son laughed. I said nothing that night, but I already knew how to answer her without a word. Before that, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And please subscribe so my story can reach more people. Dinner was at their house. My son sat at the head of the table, his wife beside him, smiling like she owned the world. She liked to talk when people were eating, to make herself sound bigger than she was. The food was good, but her words ruined it. She looked at me and said, "At your age, I'd be in a nursing home." My son laughed. It was quiet, but I heard it. I didn't say anything. I just looked at my plate and kept cutting my food. She thought she was funny. She didn't know what I knew. She kept talking about her company, about how she built it from nothing, how everyone admired her. I sat still and let her talk. Every word she said was half true. The company was real, yes, but she didn't build it. I did. The money came from my savings, from the account I opened when my husband died. My son had asked for help. He said they needed funds for registration, equipment, and rent. I gave it to them, but I didn't hand it over freely. I made sure the paperwork listed me under the trust that owned the rights. She never read a thing. She just signed where my son told her to. That was her mistake. That night, as she laughed at me, I remembered every detail of those papers. Every renewal, every fee, every form. I kept them safe. She thought she was the boss, but the truth was sitting in my cabinet at home, under a lock. I didn't argue. Old. People who argue with the young always lose. Silence wins more. I finished my food and watched her pour more wine. She told stories about people she fired, about how smart she was, about how experience didn't matter in the new world. I smiled and nodded. She thought I agreed. My son watched me, unsure what to do. He didn't stop her. He never does. She controls the talk. He just follows. That used to bother me, but not anymore. I had something stronger than words. I had proof. When she laughed again and said, "You should sell that old house and move somewhere quiet," I felt the last piece of patience fall away. I knew I wouldn't fight her with anger. I would fight her with law. I already had my lawyer's number saved in my phone. I planned to call in the morning. After dinner, she thanked me for coming, fake smile still on her face. She said, "It's good to see you still walking around so well." My son chuckled again. I looked at her and said, "I manage." That was it. No scene, no shouting. I walked to the car alone, slow but steady. On the way home, I thought about how quick people forget. She forgot who helped her start that business. She forgot who paid the bills when her ideas failed. She forgot what's written on the papers she never read. When I got home, I went to my study, unlocked the drawer, and pulled out the folder. Everything was still there. The receipts, the trust registration, the business documents, the clause that said ownership would remain with me until I decided otherwise. I checked the signatures. Hers was there. She signed it herself 5 years ago. I smiled for the first time that night. The same hand she used to point at me had also signed her own downfall. I placed the folder on my desk, turned off the light, and went to bed. I slept well for the first time in weeks. She thought she had embarrassed me, but she had no idea the ground under her feet was mine. The next day, I made an appointment with my lawyer. I didn't tell my son. I didn't tell anyone. I just waited, quiet, patient, and ready. From the first day she came into my son's life, I saw what she wanted. It wasn't love, it was position. She looked at people the way a buyer looks at furniture, deciding what's worth keeping and what's worth selling. She smiled when she needed something and turned cold when she got it. My son called it confidence. I called it hunger. When they got married, she talked about dreams, business, and success. She wanted control over everything, the house, the money, the people. She spoke like she already owned it all. My son didn't see it. He thought he'd found a strong woman. He didn't notice she was counting what she could take before she even unpacked her bags. When they started their company, I offered to help. I told them I could lend some money. She smiled wide, said I was generous, and called me Mom, like it meant something. I knew better. I asked them to sign a few papers first, normal things, or so I made it sound. She didn't even read them. She was too busy planning how she'd spend the profits she didn't have yet. She wanted fast results, easy fame, and quick power. I watched her build her image, not her work. She spent more time online posting about her brand than working on it. My son worked late nights. She worked on being seen. That was the difference. When the company began to grow, she changed. She stopped pretending to be polite. She stopped asking. She started demanding. She said the company was hers, that she ran everything, that my son was just a helper. He didn't argue. He let her talk. I stayed quiet too. Arguing with people like her doesn't work. They don't listen. They perform. She made everyone think she was self-made, that no one had helped her. The truth sat in my desk drawer, every signature, every clause, every cent that came from my pocket. She owned nothing but the noise she made. She wanted power in every room. If people were talking about someone else, she'd interrupt to bring it back to herself. If someone succeeded, she'd remind them how small they were compared to her. It was constant. She even started trying to manage me, telling me how to dress, where to sit, what to eat. I let her talk. Letting her believe she was winning made her careless. She stopped paying attention to details. She stopped reading documents. She signed renewals without checking the names. She ignored the fact that everything went through the family trust, my trust. I watched her talk about her company like it was her empire, but the walls of that empire were built with my hands. She began spending more: designer bags, cars, and parties. The kind that looked good on camera but left bills unpaid. She told people she was rich, but she was living on borrowed image. She forgot that the foundation of her success was tied to my name. When the taxes came due, she sent them to my son to handle. When new investors joined, she took the credit. My son stayed quiet. He said it was easier that way. He was right. Silence can destroy people faster than shouting. I watched her talk to others like they were servants. She even spoke to me like I was someone she tolerated out of duty. She'd say things like, "You wouldn't understand. It's a modern business." She didn't realize I understood everything: the contracts, the ownership, the power behind paper. She thought age meant ignorance. She never learned that quiet doesn't mean weak. Every time she opened her mouth to brag, I remembered the signature that gave me control. Every time she insulted me, I thought of the renewal fees I paid that kept the company in my name. She was proud of a castle she didn't own, and she was too busy admiring herself to see the cracks forming beneath her. That night after dinner, when I looked at her across the table, I didn't see arrogance anymore. I saw panic waiting for the right moment to appear. I knew it would come. All I had to do was wait. The plan didn't start with anger. It started with paperwork. Years ago, when my son came to me asking for help to fund their business, I agreed. But I didn't trust promises made out of love. I trusted documents. I went to my lawyer and told him to prepare everything properly. The company would be registered under my family trust. My son and his wife would be listed as employees with limited authority. They could manage the operations, but ownership stayed with me. I didn't hide it. I just didn't explain it in detail. They signed the documents quickly, happy to get the money. That was the seed I planted. Quiet, legal, permanent. Each year, when the company renewed its license, I made the payments myself. Small fees, unnoticed, but those payments kept the name mine. I never missed a date. My lawyer reminded me once a year, and I signed without delay. My son never asked why the invoices came to me. His wife never looked at the papers. She believed she was the owner because she spoke like one. Confidence blinded her. She thought big words meant power. She didn't know real power sits in who holds the papers, not who makes the speeches. When the company grew, she started telling people she built it from the ground up. She told that story so often she began to believe it herself. Investors, friends, even my son repeated her version. I didn't correct anyone. Truth doesn't need defending when it's written in black ink. I watched her celebrate herself, throwing parties, posting photos, talking about her brand. Every time she bragged, I smiled a little inside. The seed I planted had taken root. She was building her pride on ground that wasn't hers. Sometimes I'd visit the office. She'd walk me through the building like a guest, not realizing every wall stood on my signature. She'd show me desks, employees, computers, and talk about expansion. I'd nod and ask simple questions. How's business? How's the team? She'd say things like, "You wouldn't understand this world, it's too fast for old people." I'd just smile. I didn't need to understand her world. She was standing inside mine. There was one day I almost told her the truth. She'd been mocking me in front of friends, saying I was lucky to have successful children. I looked at her and thought about correcting her, but I stopped myself. Letting her live in her lie was better. The longer she believed, the harder she'd fall when the truth came out. She thought the world admired her, but all that admiration was sitting on paper with my name at the top. My lawyer once asked why I never took control earlier. I told him timing matters. You don't pull a seed before it's grown. You wait until the roots are deep, until the tree casts a shadow over the person who thought they owned it. He said I was patient. I said no, I was just done being underestimated. As the years passed, I made quiet changes. I updated the trust. I made sure my granddaughter would inherit everything directly. I shifted assets slowly, carefully, leaving no trace that would alert anyone. My daughter-in-law was too busy planning her next vacation to notice. She didn't even attend the renewal meetings. She sent assistants instead. Every time she ignored those details, she tightened my control. By the time she started mocking my age, the company was mine in every legal sense. She couldn't sell it, transfer it, or borrow against it without my consent. She didn't know that, but she was about to. The night of that dinner, when she laughed about my wrinkles, she laughed at the woman who owned her future. That's what made me smile quietly. The seed I planted years ago wasn't money. It was a lesson that greed can't read fine print, and pride never checks paperwork. All I had to do now was let it bloom in front of her. The day would come soon, and I was ready. The night it happened started, like any other family dinner. My son invited me over, said his wife wanted to celebrate another great quarter. I already knew what that meant, her showing off again. I went anyway, not because I wanted to, but because I wanted to see how far her arrogance had grown. The table was set like a photo shoot. Expensive wine, shiny plates, candles that smelled like money. She loved pretending to live like royalty. My son sat beside her, quiet, letting her lead as usual. She poured herself a drink, looked across the table at me, and said, "You must be proud, Mom. At your age, I hope I still remember what success feels like." Then she laughed. My son smiled too. He always smiled when he didn't know what else to do. I didn't answer. I just nodded and took a sip of water. She took my silence as weakness. People like her always do. She leaned back, smirking, and said, "Maybe you should start writing your will before you forget who owns what." That was the moment I decided it was time. I had tolerated her words long enough. Every insult she threw was a reminder of the papers she'd never read. She thought she was mocking an old woman. She was really mocking the one person who could take everything from her without raising her voice. She kept talking about her company, her staff, her success. She said she built everything herself, that no one helped her, that she earned every bit of it. I let her talk. Every lie she spoke only made what I planned next easier to justify. She said age was a curse, that older people slowed the world down. I smiled again. The truth was, her world only existed because someone older had built it for her. My hands, my money, my patience, everything she stood on came from me. Dinner dragged on. She told a story about firing an employee for being too slow. I noticed how proud she sounded saying it. She thought power was measured by who you could humiliate. I let her laugh, let her enjoy her little stage. I was quiet, calm, careful. There was no reason to argue. She would learn in her own way soon enough. The only sound I remember clearly was the ticking clock above the dining table. Every tick felt like it was counting down to something she didn't see coming. After dessert, she made one more joke about my shaking hands. She said, "You might want to let someone younger sign your checks before you drop the pen." She laughed again, proud of herself. My son didn't even look at me. That told me everything. The son I raised was gone, replaced by a man who was too afraid to stand up for what's right. I didn't feel anger anymore, just a cold decision forming inside me. She thought she'd made me feel small. All she really did was remind me how much power I still had. When I left that night, I didn't say goodbye. I didn't even look back. I drove home slowly, went straight to my study, and pulled out the file I'd kept locked for years. I opened it, checked every document, and smiled. Everything was in place. Every clause, every signature, every renewal. The company she bragged about owning belonged to me. The seed I planted was ready to grow into consequence. The next morning, I called my lawyer and told him it was time for a review meeting. He understood right away. We agreed to invite them both under the pretext of updating financial records. I wanted her there. I wanted her to hear the truth in a professional setting, where every word would be official. I didn't plan to yell, argue, or gloat. I just wanted her to sit in a room and listen while the law reminded her who she'd been laughing at. That night at dinner, she thought her jokes made her powerful. What she didn't know was that every laugh was digging her own hole, and I was done pretending not to see it. The next morning, I took out the entire folder from my cabinet and went through each page slowly. Every document was signed, dated, and verified. The company that she believed belonged to her had never truly been hers. From the beginning, all rights, registrations, and ownership were tied directly to my family trust. Her name appeared on some operational documents, but that meant nothing. It only gave her authority to act, not to own. She had never read the paperwork properly. She was too focused on appearances to notice the fine print. My lawyer and I had been careful. Every renewal, every filing, every stamp was under my name. She had built her image on a foundation that didn't belong to her. I sat there reading, remembering how she used to brag about being a self-made woman. She would say, "No one handed me anything." But the truth was, she had been handed everything, and she never cared enough to check who was really in charge. I had paid every renewal fee from my own account for years. I did it quietly, without reminders or questions. She assumed the accountant handled it. She never noticed the checks were signed by me. She never noticed that the corporate address listed wasn't her office, but my house. Her pride had blinded her completely. As the years went by, my lawyer would send me updates about the company's filings. Each time I'd ask the same question, "Is my control still valid?" He always said yes. She had signed the partnership documents long ago when she needed the money to start. That original contract still stood. It stated clearly that the company operated under the family trust. That meant any assets, profits, or subsidiaries were legally tied to me. It was quiet control, the kind that doesn't need to be spoken about until the right moment comes. And that moment was close. While she spent money on expensive handbags and private dinners, I made sure every tax document remained perfect. She thought her accountant handled everything, but her accountant worked for me. Every report, every audit, every change, I saw it first. My lawyer had built the system so well that even if she tried to take control, she would hit a wall of paperwork. I never planned to use it against her, but after the way she treated me, I realized I didn't owe her patience anymore. I looked at the file and noticed something she would never understand. Every piece of power she thought she had was borrowed. Every decision she made, every investor she impressed, every dollar she claimed as hers existed under my authority. She lived like an owner, but in the eyes of the law, she was an employee. That's what the paperwork said. I didn't need revenge. I only needed the truth to be read aloud. And that was exactly what would happen. When my lawyer called later that day, he said everything was set. The files were complete, the documents ready, and the meeting booked for Friday. I didn't tell my son. I wanted him to hear it at the same time she did. My lawyer prepared the ownership summary, company certificates, and annual returns. Everything was clean, everything was legal, nothing could be argued or denied. I didn't have to lie, twist facts, or exaggerate. The paper spoke for itself. I sat in my chair and stared at the folder one last time before putting it away. I thought about how many times she laughed at me, how many times she dismissed my opinions. She thought age meant weakness, but age meant I had time to plan, time to build, time to secure. She ignored the paperwork because she didn't understand that real power doesn't shout. It sits quietly in a drawer until it's needed. By the time Friday came, I was calm. I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel angry. I felt ready. She had mocked me for being old, but she had no idea that the hands she laughed at were the same ones that owned her company. Friday arrived without a sound. I woke up early, dressed neatly, and took the folder from the drawer. My lawyer had already confirmed the time, 3 p.m. sharp. The meeting would take place at his office downtown. The same office where, years ago, I'd signed the papers that gave me control of the company. I had been younger then, but not foolish. I believed in written proof, not spoken promises. That belief was about to pay off. I arrived early. My lawyer greeted me with his usual calm expression. The conference room was ready. The documents were neatly arranged in a single pile on the polished wooden table. Across from where I sat, 2 empty chairs waited, one for my son, one for his wife. A small tray with water glasses sat in the middle. It looked like an ordinary business meeting, but I knew it wasn't. For them, this would be a storm they didn't see coming. At 3:10, they arrived. My daughter-in-law entered first, confident and loud as always. She wore her best suit, the kind people wear when they expect to win something. My son followed behind her, quiet, holding a briefcase that probably didn't even belong to him. She greeted my lawyer with a fake smile and said she hoped this would be a quick review. My lawyer nodded politely and told her to have a seat. I said nothing. I simply looked at her and waited. The meeting started with small talk. My lawyer thanked them for coming and explained that it was time to go over the company's ownership and financial standing for the year. She nodded quickly, pretending to understand, but I saw her growing impatient. She wanted it over. She thought it was just routine paperwork, a formality. She had no idea that what she was about to hear would change everything she thought she owned. My lawyer began reading. The company, registered under family trust number. He read slowly, clearly. My daughter-in-law glanced at her phone, barely listening. My son stared at the table. Then came the line that changed the air in the room. Primary ownership of the company remains under the family trust of Mrs. Name. He said my name next. The words hung in the air like a cold draft. She froze. Her phone slipped slightly in her hand. I could see the confusion building behind her eyes. She leaned forward and said, "Wait, what do you mean remains under?" My lawyer adjusted his glasses and repeated the sentence. According to the original contract and all renewal filings, the company belongs to the family trust. You are listed as an employee and operational manager. Her face twitched. She looked at my son, expecting him to defend her, but he didn't say a word. He looked shocked too. He'd never bothered to read anything either. She started to argue, saying there must be some mistake, that she was the owner, that everyone knew it. My lawyer stayed calm. He pulled out the original documents. "You signed this," he said, sliding the first paper toward her. Her signature was right there, bold, careless, confident. She recognized it instantly. The silence that followed was heavy. Her hands began to shake slightly. My son whispered her name, but she didn't respond. I sat still. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. There was no need. Everything that needed to be said was already on paper. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time, not as the old woman she mocked, but as the person who had just taken her empire without raising her voice. The meeting continued, but she wasn't listening anymore. My lawyer explained the next steps, the control clauses, and the financial rights. She nodded, but her eyes were blank. When the meeting ended, she stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. Her face had gone pale, almost white. She didn't say goodbye. She walked out of the room without looking back. My son followed her, silent. I stayed behind a moment, watching the empty chairs. My lawyer asked if I wanted to pursue any legal action against her for mismanagement. I said no. She had already punished herself by believing she was smarter than the truth. I picked up my folder, thanked him, and left. The hallway felt lighter on the way out. That day, she learned what I'd known all along: words fade, but signatures stay. The moment the lawyer finished reading my name, the air in the room changed. You could hear the hum of the ceiling fan and the faint tick of the wall clock. My daughter-in-law's eyes blinked twice, trying to process the words she had just heard. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. It was the first time I had ever seen her truly speechless. She looked from the lawyer to my son, searching for help, but none came. He sat still, his expression blank, as if his brain had shut down along with hers. The lawyer didn't pause long. He kept speaking in his calm, steady tone, explaining that the official registration documents confirmed I was the majority shareholder and founder. He listed dates, contract references, and filing details. Each word hit her like another drop of cold water. She kept blinking, trying to regain control, but the reality only grew heavier with each sentence. The paper in front of her had everything she needed to understand: my name, the seal, and her own signature confirming it all. Her hand trembled when she reached for the file. She skimmed the first page, then the second, flipping faster as if she could find a loophole. Her breathing turned uneven. "That can't be right," she whispered, but no one responded. She looked up again, this time directly at me, her face drained of color. There was no fight left in her expression, only shock. The confidence she had worn like perfume for years vanished. The silence that followed was colder than any argument could have been. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just watched her. Her face told the story for her: how greed had replaced gratitude, how arrogance had blinded her. The same woman who mocked me for my age now sat frozen, realizing that the old woman she laughed at owned everything she built her pride on. The lawyer continued explaining how the shares, the assets, and the company accounts all fell under my trust. He pointed to each document, showing the legal chain of ownership. Each explanation pulled another shade of color from her cheeks. My son finally spoke. His voice cracked slightly as he asked, "So what does this mean?" The lawyer turned toward him and said, "It means your mother controls all major financial decisions and retains ownership of the company." My daughter-in-law stared at him, expecting him to argue, but he said nothing more. The silence between them said everything. She realized that she had mocked the wrong person. The lawyer closed the file and looked at me for confirmation before finalizing the statement. I nodded once. The meeting was officially over. My daughter-in-law's chair creaked as she stood up. Her knees seemed weak, her hands gripping the table for balance. Her eyes were wide but unfocused, like someone waking up from a bad dream. The strong, confident woman who had spent years talking down to me looked smaller now, shaken, uncertain, and pale. I could see her trying to rebuild her pride, but it was gone. She glanced toward the door, then toward my son, but he was staring at the floor. She whispered something to him that no one caught, then grabbed her purse and left the room without another word. The sound of the door closing behind her echoed across the quiet office. The lawyer exhaled softly, as if the air itself had been holding its breath. My son stayed seated, not looking at anyone. He mumbled that he needed to go after her and walked out slowly, leaving me and the lawyer alone. I gathered the papers, stacked them neatly, and placed them back into the folder. The lawyer asked if I wanted to send a copy to her, but I shook my head. She already had her copy, the one with her signature on it. That was enough. I didn't need to prove anything more. Her face at that table was proof enough that the truth had spoken. When I stepped outside, the air felt lighter. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt finished. I had waited for this moment patiently, and now it was done. She had mocked my age, and in return, I had shown her what time really teaches. Never underestimate quiet people who keep their paperwork in order. Her face would stay pale for a long time, not from fear of me but from realizing she'd handed me her company years ago, one careless signature at a time. After that meeting, everything began to fall apart for her piece by piece. The next morning, my phone buzzed with messages. Her company's accounts had been locked for review. Suppliers were calling, unsure who to contact now. Employees were confused because the ownership details had changed overnight. The system had updated automatically once the legal documents were confirmed. She tried to access her company email, but the credentials were already reset. Within hours, her image of control had disappeared. By noon, the bank had frozen the corporate credit line pending verification. Her cards stopped working. Transactions bounced. The same stores where she spent money every week now declined her payments. She went to the office to confront the staff, but they didn't treat her like the boss anymore. The receptionist asked for identification before letting her in. The accountant avoided eye contact. The whispers followed her down the hallway. She realized too late that people only respect power while you have it. My son called that afternoon, his voice tight with panic. He said she hadn't stopped crying. He wanted me to fix it. I told him there was nothing to fix. Everything was legal, everything was real. He didn't know what to say. For the first time, he didn't defend her. He sounded small, like a boy again. I didn't enjoy his fear, but I didn't comfort it either. They had built their lives on pride. Pride never lasts long. The following day, her lawyer reached out to mine, demanding clarification. My lawyer responded with scanned copies of every signed agreement. Each one had her signature clearly visible. There was nothing to dispute. She had given me ownership willingly when she needed my investment. She had just never bothered to read what she signed. That mistake couldn't be undone. Her lawyer went quiet after that. No one could fight what was written and sealed. The news spread faster than she expected. Her friends started to distance themselves. The same people who once attended her parties stopped calling. The investors she used to impress began redirecting their calls to me. They wanted stability, not drama. They said they trusted my judgment more. She lost business contacts, credibility, and the illusion of success all in the same week. She posted nothing online, no smiling pictures, no updates, no celebrations. Silence replaced her confidence. One night my son came by the house alone. He sat at my kitchen table with his head down. He said she wasn't eating or sleeping, that she felt like her life was over. I poured him a cup of tea and told him she had chosen this path the day she let arrogance guide her. He asked me if I was happy. I told him happiness wasn't the goal, peace was. And peace only comes when truth is allowed to stand on its own. He didn't reply. He left quietly after finishing his tea. A week later, she tried one last time to reach me. She showed up outside the law office, waiting by the door. When I walked out, she approached slowly, holding a folder in her hand. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were desperate. She said she wanted a second chance, that she didn't mean what she said at dinner, that she respected me. I listened without interrupting. Then I reminded her that respect after exposure isn't respect, it's survival. I told her I wasn't angry, I was simply finished. She didn't argue. She just nodded, eyes wet, and walked away. After that day, she disappeared from the company entirely. The office ran better without her. The staff seemed relieved. My lawyer finalized the paperwork, transferring her remaining managerial duties to someone qualified. I didn't brag. I didn't celebrate. I simply moved forward. When I went home that evening, I looked at the same table where she had once laughed at my age. I remembered how she mocked my hands for trembling. Those same hands had just signed the documents that ended her empire. I felt no guilt. I had given her every chance to respect me, and she wasted them all. Now she understood that age doesn't weaken, it records everything. And when the time is right, it reminds you who really built what you're standing on. After the collapse, things went quiet. Her name stopped appearing in company updates. The calls that once came every morning about meetings, investors, and ideas stopped completely. My phone stayed still for days. It was strange how silence could say so much. I didn't ask about her, and I didn't need to. News traveled fast, even without words. People talked. Her business circle started cutting ties. Clients wanted reassurance, and I gave it to them. The company stabilized under my management. What she had turned into chaos, I turned back into structure. My son visited me less. When he did, he spoke little. I could see the weight on his face, the embarrassment, the confusion, the regret. He wanted to defend her, but he knew the truth too well. I never reminded him. He didn't need reminding. He had watched her insult me, dismiss me, and treat me like a burden. He had laughed along sometimes. Now those laughs must have echoed in his head. I didn't punish him. I simply gave him space to understand. Sometimes silence teaches better than lectures. Weeks passed, and I started noticing how quickly people forget success when it fades. The same neighbors who used to praise her stopped mentioning her name. Invitations that once filled her calendar stopped coming. The small taste of power she had lived on was gone. I didn't need revenge anymore. Watching her vanish from the world she built with arrogance was enough. I didn't feel proud, just calm. She had written her own ending. I had only given her the pen years ago when she signed those documents without reading them. She moved out of the big house into a small apartment on the edge of town. My son said she couldn't handle the stares or the gossip. The same people who had once envied her now pitied her. Pride turns to pity faster than anyone expects. I never said a word to hurt her. I didn't have to. Her actions had already done all the damage. I just carried on with my days, reading the newspaper, tending my garden, paying bills on time, running the company smoothly. Stability replaced noise, peace replaced arguments. Every week, my lawyer sent me updates. The company profits grew again under my supervision. Employees worked better, morale improved, and clients returned. She had led with ego. I led with order. The difference showed quickly. My son started visiting the office again, not as a boss, but as a helper. It was humbling for him, but he did it quietly. I let him. It was time he learned that respect isn't given because of a title. It's earned through discipline. I didn't mention his wife once. He didn't bring her up either. Then one afternoon a letter arrived. No sender's name, just a plain white envelope. Inside was a short note written in shaky handwriting. It said she was sorry for what she had done, not for losing the company, but for forgetting who had built it. She said she understood now that mocking someone's age means mocking your own future. I read the letter twice and then folded it neatly back into the envelope. I didn't respond. Forgiveness didn't need words. She would know I had read it because I hadn't destroyed it. Life went back to normal after that. No drama, no noise, no show. I attended board meetings when needed, took walks in the morning, and spent weekends with my granddaughter. She was growing fast, polite, and curious, the opposite of her mother. I wanted to teach her what her mother never learned, that respect and patience are stronger than pride and money. She listened. I could see in her eyes she would grow into someone better. Months later, I walked past the old dining table, the same one where my daughter-in-law had mocked my age. It was quiet now, peaceful. The laughter that once hurt me had long faded. I smiled faintly, not from satisfaction, but from relief. The past had finally settled. The company was safe, my dignity was intact, and the lesson had been delivered without shouting or revenge. In the end, all she lost was everything she valued most, control, and all I gained was what she never understood, peace. It took months for the noise to completely fade, but when it did, I finally saw everything clearly. Age doesn't weaken, it clarifies. It strips away the lies people tell and leaves only the truth standing. She had mocked my wrinkles, my tremor, my slow steps, but every line on my face held a record of the things she could never fake. Endurance, patience, and experience. She thought power came from confidence and noise. She never understood it comes from knowing when to stay silent and when to act. Sometimes, power isn't in who speaks the loudest, but in who writes the last signature. I had written mine quietly, years ago, and it had been waiting all this time. When she laughed at me that night at dinner, I already knew how the story would end. I didn't need to argue, shout, or defend myself. The documents were my defense. The law was my voice. The truth was my witness. Age doesn't make you helpless, it gives you memory, and memory holds everything. I still see her name in old files sometimes, printed beside mine. I don't tear them up or hide them. They're reminders of how arrogance burns itself out. She had thought I was just an old woman clinging to the past, but she was the one living in an illusion. I had been building protection around myself while she was too busy chasing attention. The same company she used to show off was never hers to begin with. The same power she bragged about had been borrowed from me. And when the truth came, it didn't knock, it simply opened the door she thought was locked. My son still visits every Sunday. He doesn't bring her anymore. He sits quietly, helps me water the plants, and talks about small things, groceries, bills, the weather. Sometimes I catch him looking at me differently. There's respect in his eyes now, the kind that only comes after losing something important. I don't rub it in. I don't remind him of the dinners, the laughter, or the humiliation. I don't need to. He remembers, and remembering is enough. I've learned that revenge isn't about destruction. It's about balance. She lost what she stole, nothing more, nothing less. I didn't ruin her. I just reminded the world of the truth she tried to hide. The lawyer's reading did more than return my ownership. It returned my dignity. Watching her face turn white wasn't joy. It was justice catching up. Sometimes age doesn't seek payback. It seeks peace through accountability. And that peace, once earned, never leaves. The company runs smoothly now. I don't interfere too much. I let the professionals handle the details while I keep an eye on the direction. I sign the papers, approve the budgets, and stay involved just enough to protect what I built. The younger employees look at me with respect. They call me Madam Founder. It makes me smile, not because of pride, but because it means I'm still seen not as someone old, but as someone who mattered. As for her, I heard she's working part-time at a consulting firm, trying to rebuild her name. I don't wish her harm. I don't wish her success either. I wish her understanding. I hope one day she realizes that mocking someone's age is mocking her own future. We all get older. The difference is in what we build while time passes. Some build noise, some build foundations. She learned that too late. Every evening, I sit on my porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset. It's quiet now. The same hands she laughed at still pour the tea steadily. The same mind she dismissed still runs the company she lost. And every time I sign a document, I remember her face at that table, the exact moment the truth reached her before the lawyer finished reading. Her face turned white not because she lost money, but because she finally realized who she had been mocking all along, the very person who made her success possible. That's the lesson she'll never forget. Age is not weakness. It's record-keeping. It remembers every word, every laugh, and every disrespect. And when the time comes, it doesn't shout. It simply signs the final page and closes the story for good.